I'm Eric Bricker, and I've been a psychotherapist for over 25 years. One thing I can tell you for certain is that no one makes it through life unscathed. At some point, many of us will rely on the trusted counsel of another person to help us navigate difficult times, or to reconcile a troubled past. Whether conventional or unconventional, professional or informal, there are a lot of different forms that helping relationships can take. This podcast is an exploration into what makes these relationships work. Who are the people that help us? How do they help us? What do people need help with? My hope is to uncover as much as I can about this very human phenomenon, and I hope that you'll join me. This is the Good Counsel Podcast. I'm Eric Bricker, and this is the Good Counsel Podcast. This morning, I am joined by the one and only John Egan, the National Director of Business Development at Futures Recovery Healthcare, right here in Tequesta, Florida. John, welcome.
Thank you, Eric. Good to be here. Appreciate it.
You and I have known each other for a minute. I'm really glad to have you here today. It's been on my list to get somebody who was a business development guy, but really more so clinical outreach, because I wanted to talk about how the evolution of that position within these healthcare agencies has really changed some of the landscape here in South Florida, the Silicon Valley of substance use disorder rehab. So I was hoping you can give me a little bit of perspective about that. I think that's kind of an interesting thing to talk about.
Sure.
And I know that you have a very compelling and interesting recovery story and your whole journey, which you and I have talked about privately.
Yeah.
Which whatever parts of that you're comfortable sharing.
Oh, I'm an open book.
I know that, which makes you a phenomenal podcast guest. I know you're like a ball of energy and an outgoing and interesting guy. So I'm excited to have you here this morning, and we're going to have some fun with this and hopefully inform some folks. So for the people out there, tell me a little bit about what an outreach coordinator or an outreach worker does at a treatment environment.
I do. Maybe it'd be best to start with there's a story that I've yet to live down. So I was working as a therapist at a outpatient center, and I had a client that couldn't remain sober. And he came into session, you could tell he was intoxicated or slightly there, recovering from, and I advised him that he's not appropriate for this level of care and that he needed to go back to a higher level of care. And he was like, no, all these reasons, and it was all BS. And through the interaction, we finally figured out that he had a poor experience at a treatment center. And I remember he told me his roommate had a CPAP machine and he somehow snored through it. So the guy didn't sleep well. Lo and behold, because I have no filter, I said, if I could find you a private room, will you go? And he's like, absolutely. And then I was like, crap, because at that point, I didn't know of a place that had a private room. It wasn't my experience in my own journey. Made a call, got connected with a rep up at Futures and toured it. That's one of the things that they do standard there is private bedroom, private bath. And while I'm doing my tour, it was one of those, there's a lot of places that have not like nice websites, but then when you go see it, you're like, this isn't the website. And this place matched the website. And I was blown away by the experience on my tour. And there was an open door and it said COO. And I popped in and I said, are you guys hiring? And she, the lady there, she laughed and she goes, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm a social worker and I've been working in clinical. And she said, no, we don't have any open positions there. And she says, have you ever thought about outreach? And I said, I'm not a dirty marketer, but thanks. And she laughed and she goes, well, good, because we don't want a dirty marketer. We would like somebody to clinically vet the programs that we partner up with and that we refer patients to.
Ironically, marketers often tend to be the best dressed people. So it's interesting that you refer to them as dirty.
Well, back then it was maybe it was just tongue in cheek.
So I want to say something about the websites because this is actually how bad that is. I remember back when internet marketing was kind of a little newer and, maybe like the early 2000s when, treatment centers and transitional houses, halfway houses were starting to put websites. There were actually some of them that all used like the same pictures. So there was this one picture of like a palm tree and the beach and a couple of people like sitting
Sure.
at the beach that was on one halfway house website, and then like a bunch of others. Really bad.
The other thing you'll see, and oh God, I hope I don't make enemies on this podcast.
Yeah, let's
today.
make some enemies.
All right. So one of my, at least I'll say flags. It's not, I want to say red flag, but a flag for further inspection is if your website just tells me the level of care, but really nothing specific other than what PHP and IOP is. Like that seems to be a carbon copy per treatment center. Whereas a treatment center that actually does customization or individual, because that's another buzzword. We do individualized treatment, but my question is, well, how? And they don't know how to answer that. So if there's that carbon copy print of what is PHP or what is IOP, that's always like the other thing. And that is another concern is if you don't have your staff on your website, I want to know why. Why don't I know who's going to be treating the client? That's what I want to ask.
Oh, that's a really good point for people that are looking at these. That's a very nuanced point. Like you should be able to have.
Yeah, because if I'm going to refer a loved one or a client or a professional that trusts me, and then the mom says, well, who's going to be treating my son? And, I look and there's no staff. Well, I don't know how to answer that.
So coming back to the original question, because this is everything that you said is actually relevant to that point. I think there was a time early on in the treatment center industry where the idea of admissions was really sort of a sales job. The goal of admissions people at that time was really to sell. There's a lot of competition among treatment centers for clients coming from out of state. And there are matrix of success where it's about filling beds, and that was what was happening. And I think because of that, it caused people to lose sight of what was important, which is, matching people with the right care environments where they were going to have the best opportunity to succeed and have a good outcome and get their needs met and be treated. And as the industry started to get more pressure to act ethically, I saw the evolution of these clinical outreach people who were really clinical people who were sort of a bridge between the facility and the admissions department and getting someone into the program and the end user, the family, the referent. Because if I call Futures and I want to have a conversation about one of my cases that I'm referring to your program and I'm talking to you about it, well, you're a guy who actually used to be a therapist in a treatment center. You have an MSW. In addition to that, you also have the institutional knowledge of your own program and academic and clinical knowledge of what you guys are offering. So you can actually plan that with me as a peer. And I'm going to walk away from that. You're going to walk away from that. We're both going to know if this can work or if it can't.
Definitely.
And that's different. And it wasn't always like that.
No. And I think, so within the realm of finding the best care for the condition that the client suffers from, most are for-profit businesses. So there's a flip side of that as well when you speak to the clinical staff, because a lot of the clinical staff they don't want to speak about the business side, understandably. However, they need to know that every person at a facility is in sales. They're selling the services of the experience. So the clinical director, the primary therapist, the case manager, they're all in a sales position. I think that word sales gets tainted, and it doesn't have to, because how are these patients or clients going to find the most appropriate if somebody's not representing it from a good standpoint?
Let me say this about that, because people in the public and people in our industry, they get upset about that. Oh, it's this program, these people, it's just about the money and all that. Let me tell you guys something, people out there. It is called the healthcare industry. And when I go to the dentist and my dentist is pitching me on Invisalign, which at 55 years old, I'm not really worried about my straightening my teeth. I kind of think the window for that is really past. But, they make money on it and they're upselling a service. And I think medical businesses, it's the healthcare industry. And so the idea that these businesses, hospitals, are not meant to make money, even if they're not for profit, that they're not having that someone's not tracking a bottom line there. The idea that because it's behavioral health care, it's some altruistic thing, I think is a little bit naive.
Very naive, especially because at the end of the day, the client experience in terms of take a very motivated and willing individual who's ready. They've hit some sort of bottom in terms of mental health or even in an addiction or alcoholism. If they're willing, we could send them anywhere. They're willing to do the work. A lot of other people are more externally motivated, whether that be some legal consequence or relational conflict, or maybe they're about to lose their position or DCF's about to take their kids. They're externally motivated to get well. And the part of treatment is to turn that external motivation into internal motivation. So that being said, the amenities and the customization of treatment and the experience and the pool and the volleyball, all those other things, the nice decor and the private bedroom and the beautiful food, all of that costs money. And it lowers the barrier for that person to continue to get well.
The thing about all of that is that having a quality facility, having it be good, having it be a place that people want to go to, it's all part of competition. You want your place to be desirable. So the fact that there is this motivation on the business side of things creates competition because I want to be better than my competitors. Well, how do I become better than my competitors? Have a, quote, better program. Well, what does that mean? Well, in the eyes of the end user, in the eyes of the client, I want it to feel not institutional. I want to be comfortable and I want quality care. And you're competing with these other entities within your industry. If there's competition, there are other people doing what you guys do, right? And so you want to be better than them. And so the business element of this, I think it promotes competition. If there wasn't that, then no one would spend the money no one would be able to spend the money to have quality programs. And that's America, people.
And even, even in your business in private practice, there are some private practitioners that they only accept self-pay. And there are others that will take insurance. And in the behavioral health care sphere, there's basically four. There's those that take Medicare, which is for the elderly or the infirmed. You have Medicaid, which is usually for the indigent or those without the resources. Then you have those that are in network. So that facility has agreed by the terms of the insurance company. And then those that are out of network that kind of live in a little more in that private pay range. And in network facilities, they're fine. But in terms of, because they've agreed to a contracted rate with the insurance company, they have to work within that financial landscape, which means that there's going to be larger group sizes. It's going to be more cookie cutter. It's going to be, you won't all have all the bells and whistles that most people say, I want this, this, this. Well, it just that business will never work under that framework. It's like economics. We treat more with less, whereas more of like a out of network or self-pay rate, you can kind of do the customization. I always use the metaphor of like an automobile. There's nothing wrong with a Honda at all. Honda gets you from point A to point B, but so does a BMW. But driving in a BMW is different than driving in a Honda. The experience is different. It has more bells and whistles. So if you're back to that client that is motivated, the Honda will get you from A to B and life will go on and everything's great. However, if that person thinks he's getting in a BMW and has a Honda experience, it's not going to be a very good outcome. So understanding the differences of price features, kind of sometimes you get what you pay for. So understanding that how it all comes together, I think some people think that's the icky part of the world, but it's the reality of the world.
And I think that you guys, your program in particular, has really done a great job of this because it is, in a way, affordable for middle-class people. I know that you can use insurance to get someone there. And yet, when you look around at the facility and the quality of people that work there and the environment itself and all the care, it has everything that one would expect from like a private pay facility. And I'm not just saying that because you're here.
I appreciate it.
Which it sounds like I probably would be, but I'm not. I mean, I've been up there. I actually did contract work with Futures, the Arenda program, for a period of time. I have institutional knowledge of the program, and
Sure.
I referred up there.
Yeah.
So it's not like I would just say this. I've been involved with it.
I appreciate
enough
it. No, it's
to feel like it's true.
Ovis, I've been there about 5 years. The thing that I wake up with in terms of an internal purpose and a respect and the drive to and the honor to represent at least Futures is we tend to be the treatment center that treats the loved ones of the people in the industry. So we treat the treatment center owners that lose focus on what recovery was for them. We treat the mother of the licensed professional counselor. We treat the sister of the case manager at another facility. So I think that it's one of those, you always say, would I send my loved ones there? Well, we actually treat the loved ones of the people in the industry. And so I think that's an honor. We're always honored to treat. And then when we talk about just our primary mental health program, we treat a lot of people in long-term recovery that maybe have 10, 15 years sober. They don't want to go back to the bottle or the pipe, but life became unbearable and they want what they consider to be the best treatment. So we're always honored. And I feel very honored to be able to help out people in the industry and their loved ones.
So just to be clear, Futures is a good place.
Yeah, it's a good place.
All right, cool. I want to be clear about that.
Sure.
All right. Dude, I didn't want to do an infomercial. I that's how good you are at the business development thing. I didn't even want to do that. And, that's how persuasive you are, John. It's very impressive.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
National director. So let's talk a little bit about you and how you got here, because you are a blanket of many colors.
Thank you.
You have a pretty rich history, pretty interesting history. And when I think about the pathway, as you've described it to me, to get from where you were at to where you are, I look at it like this. There are thousands of people that come to South Florida every year seeking recovery from substance use disorders, psychiatric disorders, these kind of miserable conditions that were just sort of unsolvable in their home environments to where you really had to leave the environment to get help. And there are people that come down here in droves seeking access to this system of care that we have here, which is pretty well developed over the course of 40 some odd years of existence. And there are some people that have really great outcomes, like miracles, where you refer to this area as the Mecca of recovery.
The Mecca.
The Mecca of recovery.
It is. I honestly believe it.
So for some people, it's a Mecca of recovery. For other people, it's kind of like a penal colony.
Yeah.
And then there's like a whole bunch of people in between. But I think you're personally an example of one of those people that came down here, had an extraordinary outcome, came from a really tough place, had an extraordinary outcome, is living an extraordinary life in sobriety and doing exceptional things. You seem very happy and healthy. And so what do you want to say about that?
I came down in 2007. I had nothing. I had burnt my life completely to the ground. I had given away my houses and cars and respect. My family wanted nothing to do with me. This would have been my 5th treatment episode. And it all started with a botched suicide. And I had no hope. The reason I had no hope is my life led to street walking and homelessness and doing things for money that people shouldn't do for money, and violating every value system that I held dear. And I thought I was the only person to go down to that darkness. And so that's why ending my life sounded like the only option, and found myself back into, well, up there they call them 302 facilities. Down here they're called Baker Act. So I was in acute psychiatric after my loss of will to live. And they sent me to a treatment center, and then I got honest about some things, and they said, you need more help. And I landed in Florida. And I shared this at the time that I landed in Florida. I wanted to be sober, but I actually didn't know what sober meant.
I want to ask you a question about that.
Sure.
Because to sit in front of you now and know you as the person that you are today, very optimistic, very full of life, very inspired individual on multiple fronts, a family guy, committed to his work, helping people. It's almost difficult to attach this persona that I'm looking at in front of me with someone who is in such despair that they actually had to be involuntarily committed for suicidality.
Yeah.
When you look back on that period of your life, are you able to connect to it? Can you connect to the thinking that you had during that period?
I speak about in my own journey of wellness. I'm a firm believer that I'm not going to be able to recall how bad it got. If getting loaded sounds like a good idea, again, because I'm not cured, but if that ever sounds like a good idea, I won't be able to recall how bad it got. That's my belief system of my journey. No, I can't recall why. I just remember it was bad. And I think about other areas that this happened. So when I was homeless, like these are my real teeth. And I was the only homeless person with teeth. Because all the other people that we were smoking crack with, they had no teeth. And so I'm sitting there, months on end, looking at them thinking they have a problem.
So even among homeless people, you were kind of an elitist. Even back then, you're like, I have teeth, you guys don't.
It wasn't it was nothing I said was my internal justification that my problem isn't as bad.
I'm still doing pretty good out here. Look at these pearly whites, man.
The bar of excellence was layered down a little bit. Looking back now, I think it's put me in a unique position, at least outside of work, to whether it's at work or outside of work, to connect to that person that's lost hope. I think especially in counseling, that if like Irving Yalom believes that proper self-disclosure can be very influential in the therapeutic bond, as long as that stuff that you're talking about is dealt with. It's not like we're unloading I don't unload my unresolved issues on clients, but I can use some of my pain to let them know, man, I know what you're going through.
Hold on a sec. Did you just drop Irv in my office here?
Are you a fan?
That's my guy.
He's my fave.
So 3 books up there, Irving Yalom. Existentialism, like I love it. Adam Saslov, you know Adam.
Yeah.
He actually turned me on to Irving Yalom, and he's the only one I quote.
Oh wow.
And I got
my wife's a clinician. She turned me on.
Yeah, he's really kind of the last of that generation of existentialists. And if you kind of look into his history, he was actually supervised by Rollo May, who wrote The Meaning of Anxiety.
No.
So he comes from that generation of real existentialists. They're all like sort of like in California and everything. We don't have so much of that here.
Yeah.
But I love him. And the fact that you just dropped Irving Yalom in my office, if I wasn't impressed before.
Well, not to crap. Listen, I think when Freud gets a bad rap, they pick about that 2% that sex rules everything, but 98% of what and I'm making up numbers, everything he formulated in psychoanalytic theory is what has evolved into what we do today.
Well, let me just say this about Sigmund Freud. No Sigmund Freud, no psychotherapy.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
No therapy. Right. Let me say it again. No Sigmund Freud, no therapy. No, someone else wasn't going to come up and think about it later and call it something else. We have it because of him, and that's just it.
That's it. Yeah. And Jung, following that, I mean, our predecessors, the ego that I just mentioned, us in the predecessor, but I guess it would be, right? In terms of our realm of what we do.
Words like denial that we use on a daily basis, we use those words because he gave them to us. That's it.
Right.
No one else came up with that concept. Brilliant. And like a lot of brilliant people who use cocaine, there's brilliance and then there's insanity. And sometimes they're just very, very closely related. And, he was very performative in his way too.
Yes.
He was an interesting cat. Did you check out, I think it's on HBO. It might be on Netflix now as well. Freud's Last Session with Anthony Hopkins as Sigmund Freud. It's, I think it came out in the last year, and it's a phenomenal movie.
I'll check it out.
It is an unbelievable performance by Anthony Hopkins.
Who's awesome.
Sir Anthony Hopkins.
He's earned the knighthood.
As Sigmund Freud.
Wow. No, I don't know how that
in his
got by me.
final days during World War II. It's supposedly based on something that could have happened, but it's fictional.
Okay.
But
I'm on board.
it is an unbelievable performance and so compelling. A little bit slow moving at the beginning, but once him and his foil kind of get into the central premise of what they're arguing, which is really about his views of religion, it's just so thought-provoking and such an unbelievable and unforgettable performance. I kind of can't believe more people aren't talking about this.
Give me the name of it one more time.
It's called I believe it's called Freud's Last Session.
Sending it to my
or
wife right
Freud's
now.
Last Patient, something like that.
Is it Netflix, HBO? Something?
I think it's on Netflix.
I'll find it.
And it came out within the last year. And I'm really surprised more people aren't talking about this movie.
You know, maybe this are the having access to everything on the tip of some of our great performances are getting missed. Remember growing up? I mean, I'm 76. We had 3, 6, 10, 29, 57. I had 5 channels.
Right.
Now we
well, and the thing is too, they fire off so many of these streaming movies that Sir Anthony Hopkins is Sir Anthony Hopkins.
Sure.
I mean, Hannibal Lecter, the guy's had legendary performances. But the thing is, he's also had a few maybe not so legendary performances.
They can't all be gems.
Yeah, because they put out a lot of stuff. And so this is one of those movies that could really fly under the radar if you're not looking for it.
I'll check it out.
Or you might not think it's as good as it is, but it is unbelievable. Super thought compelling, especially if you're a therapist. You got to see this. Yeah. It's incredible.
That's awesome. We went down a tail. I forget where we were. Where were we before that?
No, who gives a shit?
Oh, okay.
No, I think we were talking about, I'm sorry. I think we were talking about your life story and how you overcame crippling drug addiction.
This is great.
I think we were talking about how you overcame crippling drug addiction and suicidality.
That's it.
To get here.
That's so
I think it was something kind of important, actually.
So then I use the term air quote sober, which means I wasn't using stimulants. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't doing any of that. However, I had not adapted any of the behavior. So I was still a con man. I was still manipulative. I was still self-seeking. I was still selfish to the core. Harmed a lot of people in early recovery with my behaviors, speaking of Freud, justifying everything I did and rationalizing that I'm sober. Started working at a call center because I'd burnt my life to the ground, and you can make a lot of money real fast in a Florida call center. Won't bore you with the details, but there came a point about 8 and 9 months into it where I met a true sober man. Then he armed me with the facts about my condition and that I had a fart's chance in a windstorm to stay sober.
Why?
Because liars don't stay sober usually.
I'm watching you now, and you could see where there's a shift. Your entire expression just changed as you said that. And I could tell you're thinking about this conversation you had. Tell me about that moment, because that sounded like, as simple of an insight as that is, the internalizing of that was deeply profound for you.
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. So every human has characteristics or a personality, and they have assets and things that are hindering them. And sometimes they're the same thing. So I'm a former fat kid, so I can be very witty, and I had to be fast on my feet because if I walk in a room and I know you're going to throw a little fat comment, I'm going to have something on you faster. I'm from the Northeast, so we speak fast. And when I do things with passion and vigor. So if I combine those 4 things, I can be very, very inspirational to others, or I can be a total sociopath. I can charm and manipulate by force or by manipulation to get what I want. And I think I didn't realize that in early recovery, I was a con man. I could go to like where people gather to get sober and just repeat what other people say to influence and to up my standard, right? Or to up my view around others. But I wasn't living that life. I was just like speaking it. And this man called me on it. And he says, you are so full of S, you don't know it. And you have no idea how close you are to using. And I believed him. I knew I knew I was full of shit.
What was it about the disingenuousness that he was able to spot that maybe other people couldn't?
Well, the way it came down is we had left. There's these meetings that people gather at, and we left the meeting, and however he spoke, I believed him, and I wanted what he had, and I asked him to take me through a course of action. And I was outside, and he gave me a few simple instructions, and I went and I go in with my car key. I went, right? And he looked at it and he goes, is that your car? And I said, yeah. He's like, what do you do for a living? Because he knew how the quantity, less than a year sober, and here I am driving a fancy sports car with a V8 engine and tinted out. It was very glamorous, right?
What kind of car?
It was one of the old, it was one of the Dodge Charger, but it was souped up and
the RT.
Yeah.
Look at you. What color was it?
Black.
Nice. What kind of rims were we talking?
Lexani. Yes, the rims were almost as
Put me in the car, Knight Rider. What are we driving here?
The rims were almost as expensive as the car itself. And
Were you the coolest person in AA?
I thought I was. You were
campaigning for it.
In terms of those 12-step fellowships, I am not at liberty to speak about my
sorry.
No. My engagement is it just in God. If I have a colossal collapse, I don't want to tell someone that it doesn't work. I say that I'm a person in recovery, and my journey is the way I do it, because I believe other people get well other areas. But I do this. He asked me about my car, and then he asked me what I did for a living, and I told him I was a software developer at a call center for timeshares. And he says, oh, you're a thief. I said, what? I said, no, I develop software. And no, he gave me the facts about what I was, and I was a liar, and I was stealing, and I was cheating. And I think up into that point, I knew, but I didn't know. Like, it was back to Freud. I maybe had repressed what I actually was doing, or just minimized what I was doing.
I think a lot of times, and we see it in therapy, right? And in other places where there's personal growth and mentorship happening, is that often when someone allows us to tell the truth or says the truth to us, and we could speak it out loud, that could be incredibly liberating.
Yeah.
Because it's the thing that we're trying to avoid, that we don't want to say. And then when we finally say it out loud, it can be incredibly liberating.
Yeah.
In fact, back to Irving Yalom, one of my favorite quotes, each of us must decide how much truth he can stand.
That is exactly what happened, because I was, I talk about sometimes the fine line between confidence and arrogance. And I might find out that I'm arrogant, but I'm not willing to face it, because I could just say, no, I'm confident. But when I actually can face what I find out, that's where the transformation happens. And that's the truth I needed to hear. And this man presented me with truth that I was full of shit and I was a con man. And
how was that? Like,
it sucked.
For real though, trying to internalize that reality, because it sounds at that point like that you were very invested in your identity.
Yeah.
And
I still am, I think.
To have this guy in such a glib way just shut all that down. That, in a way that was also glib, short, but at the same time undeniable.
Yeah. And for my personality type, that's what I needed. I need someone to bash me over the head with the truth. Because I'm a fast talker, so I can pop. Like I can go into a verbal warfare with you, but this man there was no chance, there was nothing I could say.
There was no bullshitting your way out of this.
Yep. I said, you know what, you're right. And, I made a decision at that point that I wanted to be sober, and I couldn't work there. And so I left, that field, and I should have known. So the money I was making at the call center, it was more than a surgeon. So I should have known something was up. But I took that money and I put myself back into school. And that's when I got into counseling. And I became a certified addiction professional and started working in the field. Back then, the licensure was a little bit less rigorous. But then I started to gather all of this, and it was something that I was good at as well. Like, have you ever heard of the Ikigai? It's a Japanese interlocking 4 circles. It's what the world needs, what you get paid for, what you're passionate about, and what you're good at. And if
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, it's awesome. But
where's that come from?
Something in it's a Japanese thought. You'll hear other people say, I've never worked a day in my life because I love what I do.
Yeah.
It's that interlocking 4 circles. And
what do you call it again?
Ikigai, Ikigai. And it's great.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. It sounds like something I need to be looking into.
And the other circles that intertwine without the intersection of the 4 is like a vocation would be something that the world needs that you don't get paid for. So it's what you're good at, and each circle has a little interlocking. But I found out that this working as a counselor is my Ikigai. I never found more purpose before in my life. And then like I remained sober, and I actually awoke in my spirit, and I married a woman, and life was great, and we were having a baby, and life was awesome.
I want to come back a little bit. You are a fast talker. I want to come back a little bit to you, because there are a lot of people who have that type of constructed personality where they're very invested in their identities, and they're also disingenuous. And someone does come along and tells them in an honest way, you are not who you say you are. You're actually very dishonest, and you need to be different in order to live a better life. And the reaction to that statement is not always so well received as you received it. I've had that conversation with a few people where it really didn't go well at all.
Sure.
So the fact is that you found someone who would say it to you, but there also must have been some readiness to take that in and hear it.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the stages of change, maybe I was contemplating that I might be full of S.
You had to know somewhere within you that something was wrong, and maybe you just needed someone that you respected.
So, and I shared there was a time when I first got hired at the company, I actually had no idea what they were doing, and I was in a back office just organizing it. And then one day I was walking the sales floor, and I heard the pitch, and I was like, that's not true. And I went to the owner who God rest his soul. He's no longer with us, but I went up to him. I was like, hey, do you know what they're saying in there? Because whatever they were just saying, we're not doing. And he looked at me. He goes, oh, dude, don't worry. It's buyer beware. And I looked at him. I was like, okay. I just like, that was the point. So I was like, maybe. And then he just said buyer beware. And I just kind of compartmentalized, back to Freud, right? I compartmentalized the bullshit, and I went on with my life because I was getting paid. So, and because I didn't have a phone on my desk, I wasn't stealing, but I knew.
There's this phenomenon among people where when you can defer responsibility for bad action onto like a larger entity, like the organization that you're with or something like that, it enables you to depersonalize it. Like, I'm not doing this thing, they're doing this thing, and therefore I don't have to be responsible, because if this person is in charge, well, they must know what they're doing, and I just work here.
Right. And as the story progresses, the federal government doesn't look at life like that. So
no, they're like, hey, there's buyer beware, and then there's you fucking beware. If you're going to be doing this stuff, you better beware.
Yeah, there's this word called fraud, and everything you did actually applies to what fraud is. So life was really good, and I had such an internal sense of purpose and meaning, and even though I was getting counselors don't make a lot of money, but I had an internal sense, and it was awesome, and life was just so beautiful. And then at 5 years sober, the federal government came to talk to me about the call center. And what I found out is, even though I left, that software I had developed, they still used. So even though I wasn't getting paid, the language they use is I was culpable the whole time. So it ended up being a $30 million scam. And I don't know if you know anything about sentencing criteria and guidelines, but I was facing 27 years in prison.
Whoa.
Sober dude here.
So that's so disturbing. And, I've had somebody say this to me about that thing, because I think there are a lot of folks who get involved in that, and the money's coming, and you really don't see it the way other people see it. And it's very easy to defer responsibility or to defer culpability when you're part of a system that you just get pulled into. And I think there are a lot of these kids in halfway houses that maybe you've got a criminal record or some things behind you that make it hard to get, you don't have a car,
right.
It's hard to get a job. And here you put a kid like that
He's trying to get traction,
who's a fast talker.
Yeah.
And one thing they know how to do is bullshit people.
That's right.
And you stick them on the phone.
And they're good at it.
Yeah. And now all of a sudden he's pulling down $10,000 a week.
Yep.
Doing that.
But he's not shooting heroin.
And he's not shooting heroin. He's pulling down $10,000 a week, self-sustaining, cool car, cool place to live. And it's kind of like, well, how do you tell him that what you're doing is wrong, especially when he's in a call center full of other people doing the same things?
Yep. Because and I'll speak on what I know of the addict's mind is if I'm not robbing my grandmom of her pain medication on her deathbed and hurting my parents and lying to them and causing disruption and nodding out at Thanksgiving and destroying holidays. And in return, I'm making $10,000 a week and Dad, you don't have to pay for my halfway house and thank you so much. And I'm really sober now and I'm not shooting heroin. I'll take that option over because I only think there are two options. I only think, and I'm defining my success by my bank balance. But at the end of the day, I always say my father did very, very well in life. And there was a line around at the viewing when they came to see him and not one person talked about the car he drove or the bank balance. They talked about what a human he was. But there's so much emphasis on the stuff that we build and we lose focus on what life's about. So,
how old were you when you lost your father?
May I share there's actually a beautiful part.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. So, at 5 years sober, I self-surrendered to federal prison. I took a plea deal and I spent the next 3 years locked up. In my own journey of recovery, I was free from the obsession to use. And I say that I walked into prison the freest I'd ever been. And it's easy to say that now. It was very difficult and I had a lot of doubts and fear and what have you. But
how old were you when you went in?
I was 35. So 12 years ago, I walked into prison.
And did you do the full 3 years?
Yeah. Well, I was 5. And then with the RDAP program and 85%, I did 35 months. I got out 8.5, 9 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been tough.
It was wild. But I deferred my dad's story. So life took some turns, right, in my personal story. And I ended up leaving prison. I went back to Philadelphia where my parents were. And a week before I got out, I called my sister and in prison, you do this countdown. You're like 7 and a wake up, 6 and a wake up. You don't count the last day because that's actually the day you leave. And my sister she said, hey, listen, we didn't want to scare you, but Dad got diagnosed a while back and we didn't want to just have your mind wander and race while you're away. And I said, what do you mean? And he was terminally ill. And in a weird way in my own journey, ideally I would have been in Florida, but God, my conception of God allowed me to go take care of my father for the last 15 months of his life on federal probation. It's one of the most beautiful things.
Oh, wow. So you got to be there with him and help out and be a caretaker.
Yep. And I kept my addiction license open and maybe it's too much detail. My father had what's called idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which basically is the lungs. Every day was the best day his lungs would ever be. And every other day would be the next worst, right? And we waited for the lung. The lung never arrived on the organ list. But while he was on full oxygen and he had a mask and it was the day before they intubated him. We're sitting there and we're talking about Villanova and and I told him about X, Y, and Z. And I said, I think maybe I want to go back to school. And I remember he took his breathing mask off because I wanted to go to USC, which had the best MSW program in some website. And he lifted his mask. He goes, go to Widener is where. And my dad, his story is he was an amazing businessman, but he was a professor on the side. He was a doctor of economics. And That's all he wanted to do, but he wanted to provide for a family. So he was a businessman to provide, but his passion was a professor, and he was a professor at Widener. And that was the last thing he ever said to me. And the next day they intubated him, and he never kind of awoke from that. But from that day forward, when he passed, there was an inheritance, and I took that and I went back to grad school.
Your father sounds
badass,
like a really extraordinary man.
He was awesome. Yeah.
Providing guidance to you right up into the very end. And it was guidance that you listened to.
Yeah. He said, you should go back to school, and why spend money on USC? Go to Widener. It's right here in PA. And lo and behold, so now I'm on federal probation with an ankle monitor, working still as a therapist at a treatment center because I kept the addiction license open, and I'm back in grad school. And
hold on a second.
That's right.
So you were going to work at a treatment center with an ankle monitor on.
Yes. They knew about it.
So I just want to say to anybody listening, this is why South Florida, only in South Florida.
No, this is in Pennsylvania at the time.
All right, scratch that. Yeah. Scratch that. I mean, it's definitely are you sure that didn't happen here? No. It should have.
Yeah, and
that's amazing.
It was wild. And at that treatment center I was working at, it's funny because I'm usually a 32-32, but I was wearing 32-34 for that extra length, so it could cover.
An ankle monitor, it's not like a beeper.
No, it's big.
Especially at that time.
Yep. And none of the clients knew.
That's a big piece of machinery.
It was awesome. There. Yeah.
It's like an old school Walkman.
I remember when I got it off because, you'll laugh about this.
How much do those things weigh back then?
They were heavy. It was heavy. Couple pounds. But
it's like it's like walking around with a 2-pound weight on your ankle.
Well, what's wild is the probation officer. So he has a whole bunch of people that are on probation. A lot of them struggle with substances. That's why maybe they're incarceration. And he finds out I treat people with substances and addictions. And he would come to me. He's like, "Hey, what should I do?" And so when he would check in on me, I would educate him about, because I guess the government doesn't invest in educating probation officers. And because I helped him each week or biweekly, he actually cut me halfway off my sentence.
I have to tell you, I've known a lot of people over the course of my career that were on probation, and very few of them had that kind of relationship with their probation officer. That is really unique.
Yeah, he wrote a personal note to have my sentence suspended in half. So my ankle monitor came off half of the time that it was supposed to be on.
That whole thing is just unbelievable.
Yeah, and that was the thing that was preventing me to come back to Florida.
Was the ankle monitor?
Yeah, they wouldn't so Florida said we have too many criminals. We're not taking any from you, because I tried to get transferred from PA to Florida. They're like, we don't want any more criminals. We have enough of our own.
I feel like the motto in Florida is there's always room for one more.
Well, and while at that treatment center, there was another therapist that we started dating, and she's my wife today. And we came back down, I guess, 9 years ago, and finished my graduate program, and then got back into the field of therapy. Now with, even more education, and then about 5 years ago, that client was drunk, and that's when I landed up at Futures, and they said they weren't hiring a clinician, but they asked me if I would do outreach, and that's what landed me there.
Not going to be a dirty marketer.
Don't want to be a dirty marketer.
What a amazing story, the whole thing. I think it's really
been fun.
Yeah.
It's put me in a unique position to a couple things. One, I'm definitely uniquely qualified to help people that have legal issues and don't know how to stay sober, for people that have lost despair and have no idea of what hope looks like. But then because I know when business takes a turn, I see some practices in behavioral health care that, like, I don't fart the wrong way. I'm not going back to prison. So when I see some of these other people in the industry that maybe lead with a policy, right? Hey, I have a Cigna, and I have to stop them right there. And I say, please don't ever refer to a patient as a policy. What's their name? What are they struggling with? Because the finances is just one piece. But I think in this field of business development, I think one of three things happen when you look at a BD rep that might not have the best reputation. One, they're a true sociopath, but you and I both know that's only about 3% of the population. So it's usually not that. Two, they maybe are in sobriety, air quotes, like I was, but haven't changed any of those manipulative or deceitful behaviors. Or three, which I think is the majority, they're trained incorrectly. So they're brought in and they have this, fill this place up, do whatever you need to do. And what that leads to is, well, down the underbelly of the industry, the body brokering and the nefarious selling practices and the high intensity, 1 for 1, 2 for 1 kind of concept. And I just think it should be different. And so I try to bring that lens of all my experiences and then all of my education with an ethical framework about what this role can be. And like when I speak with professionals, it's let's conceptualize if futures is even an option. And if not, I have vetted a couple facilities that may be a better option for you. Instead of, no, we're not in network with that policy, or, the financial piece is just one piece of a case. And way too often, at least in my field, it's the only piece of the case. And I want to change that.
It's interesting because this conversation started off, I was interested in talking about the business development aspect and really the clinical outreach piece, which is something that I've seen evolve over my time working in our industry. And I've noticed more and more so that there are people like yourself who also have clinical backgrounds that are doing it. I think about like Vanina at Family First, Marina,
sure,
who has an office right up here.
Yeah, Liza,
yeah. And there's like a few of them that have legit clinical backgrounds, have been therapists before, and really are peers of the therapists that are referring cases to them. And so we start a conversation with that. And then we get into your whole entire story, which really brings us back to that, because your commitment to being ethical, say, as a business development person, it's really rooted in your entire story of how maybe having a more corrupted mind at a particular time can really take you down such a dark path that in order for you to be where you're at, have what you have, all of these things, you have to be super rigorous.
You have to. And your aim, everyone's aimed at something. No matter, in every moment, everybody's aimed. If I'm hungry, I'm aimed at eating. My aim, hopefully, I try to always be on what is best for this situation, not only just the client, but like the family system that's involved. Like there's a place called Lakeview up in Jacksonville, and they do separate, men stay with men and females stay with female. And if I'm working on a case that might be an amazing financial case and they want all the bells and whistles, but they have a history of getting into a relationship in every co-ed facility they've ever been to, I'm going to defer that up to somebody that does gender-specific programming, just because that's what's most appropriate than the short-term admit at a facility. So there's always going to be like little nuances that I think you have to just take into perspective. And there's treatment centers that really specialize in a disorder. So while we do this really well, maybe we don't do that very well, and vice versa. So,
well, I feel like because we're this, again, Silicon Valley of the treatment industry, right? I keep using that term, Silicon Valley.
I like it.
It's my own term, and I keep waiting for it to catch on, and it just hasn't. Is it time to give up on that, dude?
No, let's just double down.
Like, am I the only one that thinks it's a cool thing to call it? All right. I got to rethink this. But because we're here and there's so many resources available, and a lot of them are very good, you really do have that opportunity to create these referral relationships where there's something accessible for everybody's need. And that's what makes our community good, is that we're all kind of working together on this. and that there's so much specialization that you can really target a particular person's need. And I've seen other parts of the country where they don't have that, and everything is really kind of institutional, or there's only like a couple of places and you get what you get.
Sure.
And that affects like the quality of training that's available to people and all the rest of it. So the culture, the industry of behavioral health in certain areas is just not that robust, especially to meet the needs with the opioid epidemic, the mental health crisis. I mean, there's a lot of need now, and it's getting more and more attention, which is good.
Yeah, and I think even that we were speaking briefly, I think before the metaphorical camera started rolling, was there's been a shift. So when I look back at South Florida and all of the treatment world, there's always this like buzzword, right? If one time it was everyone had a Christian track, and then it was everybody treats first responders, and then everyone specializes in EMDR. About 3 years back, businesses started to realize that in insurance, you can tap into what's called mental health benefits. And so now we treat mental health.
That's a huge issue.
Huge issue.
You have to build your program around mental health.
Safety.
To do it correctly.
Sure.
And I think there are agencies that simply are going for the mental health benefit without really fashioning their program to treat that population. So you have these programs that are really based on, a Florida model, substance use disorder treatment model, and they're crowbarring in people with psychiatric disorders. Profound psychiatric disorders, and kind of crowbarring them in there.
It's bad.
And it's, they're sitting there and they're talking about relapse prevention. Yep. And they're going to AA meetings. Yep. And, they're doing a lot of these things that really have not much of anything to do with having schizophrenia.
Right. And listen, I always use the example, the guy that shoots heroin in his neck with a needle is suffering, and the person with the thought disorder that thinks he needs to meet the president at 4 is suffering as well. To put those two in the same group, I'm baffled.
Well, what you're going to have is they're each going to complain about the other one.
No, I don't want to throw this out into the ether. No, somebody's going to die. Right? Somebody's going to die in an institution because they are not properly well equipped with understanding the high propensity of, I see this often with some of these that we now treat mental health, and then they have a client that claims suicidal intent, not plan, right? So I don't want to wake up tomorrow, which is be suicidal intent, not a plan. And they're taking the I don't want to wake up tomorrow, and they're sending them up to an acute psychiatric facility to now be Baker acted in an institution where they never needed to go. They just need to understand that, some of these, that chronic suicidal intent, that's their baseline. And to throw them into an institution is only going to harm them to distrust the practitioners who are trying to help them.
People often don't understand the role of their agency within the continuum of care, right, and the care ladder. So the whole idea of a day-night treatment program, like a Florida model program where there's separate housing and like a treatment facility, or even like a residential, which Futures is more of a residential, right?
Yeah, we're subacute voluntary residential.
Right. So even that is meant to be a lower step on the ladder to acute care,
sure,
like a hospital setting. And so the whole idea is we are meant to prevent you from hospitalization. And we have to be equipped to meet your needs at this level, and you have to be appropriate for this level.
That's right.
And if we don't screen adequately, we're going to take people at this level of care who don't belong in this level of care, and they're ultimately going to need to be hospitalized, which not only is a wash, but also super disruptive for the other people in the program, diversion of resources in the program from people, that are not, because, when you have a crisis like that, it's all hands on deck, and a terrible experience for the individual
and the population, right? Because a lot of these behaviors are disruptive, and they're somebody with an anxiety disorder that is fearful by nature, or suffers from a panic disorder. Another one decompensates on their meds and has a disruption. Well, now this person's not safe. Why am I in treatment? I'm going to go back home and now hold my family hostage in my own emotional unwellness. I mean, the cataclysmic ripple of that can happen from a facility who wants to now treat mental health without proper procedures and policies to make sure safety and compliance is number one. Like the DCF standard and the ACA standard for staffing is completely different. And these just wanted like, let's just make money on this. And I just think that there should have been a bit of a slower roll before it.
No, I get it. And I think you're right. And so in all of the ways that we've talked about today in which our industry really has improved itself through necessity in order to survive and to be able to provide quality care, as opposed to, being the bane of the healthcare industry in the country, in the ways that we've evolved to provide better care. Still got a little ways to go.
We still have ways to go. Yeah, and I don't knock anyone for wanting to turn a profit in an ethical landscape. It's the American dream. But when they start just like multiplying, it just reminds me of...
You can't do it at the expense of the population that you're trying to help. If you're going to do it, you have to do it well and you have to do it correctly because you're dealing with people's lives and their families and all the rest of it. Well, John, thank you so much. This was really super cool. I'm glad that you made the time to come out and do this. It was a lot of fun. Very easy interview. And I appreciate you sharing so intimately and personally about this. I think you've provided some very interesting insight into the whole treatment landscape and what you guys are doing up at Futures. If someone wanted to hear more about Futures and the programs that you guys are offering, how do they get in touch with you? Or
yeah, they can always they call my cell, which is 610-938-7589. And most importantly, if we are not the fit for a case, I have a team that vets programs nationwide, and we can make other recommendations from to make sure that it's appropriate placement.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining me. This has been great.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
All right.